Good morning, good morning. Happy Wednesday. Happy Wellness Wednesday. Is my lighting off? Am I blurry? What's going on here? I have some weird light because we have plants inside with a grow light on them. So it casts kind of a weird tinge around me. And I feel like it's giving me kind of a weird extra glow. In any case, so if I look glowy to you, that's why. And I'm running a little bit late this morning because I had something stirred up my sinuses and I had a little sneezing fit right before it was time to get on. And so I had to give it a couple minutes to make sure it was cleared out so that I didn't continue to have it while I was here with you today. In any case, if you're just stumbling on my page, now that you know all my problems, my name is Donna. I'm a mom, a Nana, a girlfriend. I am a activewear boutique owner, activewear and wellness boutique owner. I am a student studying for my Master of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling. And I just really feel like this is strange looking today. So I hope I don't look as strange to you as I look to me right now. In any case, I'm a runner, I'm a jazzerciser, I'm a huge wellness advocate. I really do think it is that other light in here. I started Wellness Wednesday because I've been in a lifelong journey with anxiety and depression. I like to think of myself as in recovery for most of the time, but I still have slips, as do we all, which is why it's in recovery, not recovered. I have learned over time that sharing tips and tricks with other people who are walking similar paths really helps. We can learn a lot from each other. And so that's why I started Wellness Wednesday. That said, even though Facebook doesn't always show me all of the things until after I'm done, please feel free to comment, ask questions, whatever. Just please keep it positive and keep it politics free, which I'm not sure that those two can go together in the same sentence right now anyway. So if you have been following me for a while, you know that last week my video was on why does this bother me so much? Kind of a speck in your brother's eye, plank in your own eye type thing. For those who are familiar with the Bible. And on Wellness Wednesday, we often dig into mindset because that's really what a lot of wellness boils down to is mindset, whether we realize it or not. But weather affects us too. And so, since it's been colder than usual for a lot of us for several days, I thought today we would lighten some things up with a few easy warm-up tips. A few of which you probably already know, but stick with me because there may be a couple here that you don't. Because there's one in particular that I just learned about a few years ago and was very skeptical of until I tested the theory. And there's a couple others that, might just be new information from you. And if you're like me, I grew up in Michigan and I know all the basics of staying warm. But some simple things I just forgot because I've been back down in Florida and I was born in Florida. So I'm Florida born, but I've been back down in Florida for so long that I did forget some basic principles. For example, when we had ice on the windshield the other day in the vehicle that the heat is broken, so the defrost doesn't work. This was a couple weeks ago on our first really good cold snap. I sat there and I was like, how the hell am I going to get this ice off the windshield? Because I'm thinking to myself, I don't have an ice scraper. And I ended up breaking out the AAA card and scraping the windshield. And so, it just took me a minute. The Michigan brain is a little slow because it's buried back there in the back. In any case, so in case you're wondering what this is about, it's been cold, y'all. It's been cold. It's cold again this morning. Here in North Central Florida, where I live, we hit 16.5 degrees for an overnight low on Monday morning. 16.5 degrees. I don't recall it ever being that cold at a time when I was actually keeping track. And our high from our weather station gives us, like it resets certain things at midnight. So the high that it gives us for the day is since midnight. The high for the morning at that point when we woke up at 16.5 degrees, our high since midnight was the same as our low the day before. And it was supposed to be warmer as far as I knew. So, I also forgot to say, if you're here, let me know you're here, even if Facebook's not showing me the things, so that I can say hi, at least if not now, afterwards, or hit hashtag replay in the comments or whatever. So even though my friend in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan was at the same temperature like I posted it and I was like, I thought it was supposed to be warmer this morning, and she posted hers and it was 16 degrees. So she was half a degree colder. So basically same temperature, but they had snow. And we only had a few flurries, which I personally saw one, drove through one on Saturday night. And so I know this is kind of like, you know, those memes that if you're cold, they're cold too, bring them inside. If Florida is cold, y'all, I know everybody else is. I know everybody else is. So New York City had 11 consecutive days of below freezing temperatures. Plus, there were reports of catastrophic ice accumulations in various places, and heaviest snowfall in years for some areas. And my boyfriend, who is never cold, like when he acts like he's a little cold, I'm like, you know, you own pants, because he's still in shorts and flip-flops, right? I'm like, you know, you have pants for that. I could tell he was over it because he turned up the heat at least twice. Was it Monday night? Yeah, Monday night, I think. Yeah, today's Wednesday? Monday night. I turned it down at bedtime. We fell asleep in the living room, but I turned it down when we were getting closer to bedtime, and that he turned it up again before we went to bed. So I know it's bad when he's cold, when he's that cold, that he's actually the one turning up the heat, not just for me, to take the chill out of the air. So I also have family in Ohio, and my cousin says she doesn't remember this harsh of a winter since she was a kid. And another friend in Michigan, where I grew up, messaged to check on me because she said I've been in Florida for too long and I'm not built for this anymore, which is not entirely untrue. I'm just saying. And then just for your information, we watch Earth Cams when we sit down to eat. It's just the two of us. So we sit down, we take like a world tour on Earth Cam. And we have seen some serious negative double digits across the ones that we look at. But just a couple that are watch worthy, is the Snowman Cam Gaylord, quite famous, very entertaining. And he's had to like dig out the camera a couple times, because they've had so much snow. And then Saranac Lake has some awesome cameras. Their lake is pretty much frozen, and they're in process of building an ice palace. So those are noteworthy, definitely worth checking out. All right, so moving on. What happens when we get colder than usual? Everybody's like, Donna, what's the problem here? I don't get it. I'm cold. All right, so what happens when we get colder than usual is cold stress affects the nervous system and our brain, which shifts us into prioritizing survival over anything else because we're trying to stay warm. Our bodies are like, okay, we're cold. We got to stay warm. Everybody else out of the way. The focus is stay warm. I saw your little face bubble, Miss Stacy. So what happens is we get mentally sluggish and energy drains faster and our mood can dip much easier, especially when we are having less sunshine, more cloud cover. We can even develop a condition known as seasonal affective disorder, which is something that has run in my family, and I really didn't think I had a problem with it, although I did take it into consideration when I was thinking about moving back up north. But a few months ago, I had a conversation with my boss, and I was like, you know, I've realized something, and you know, I'm working from home, so I can walk outside anytime I want to. I'm like, I realized something is that when we have gloomy weather 2 or 3 days in a row where the sun's not out and it's gray and it's dark and it's yuck, it affects my mood, which means that seasonal affective disorder, which can totally be hereditary, might be trying to creep in on me too. So a few months ago, I got a therapy lamp, and that seems to help. You know, you limit it to morning use, but it does seem to help if I can't get out in the sunshine or the sun's just not out. But again, that has nothing to do with cold. That's more about light. The point here is that this cold weather affects us on numerous levels. So there are some pretty obvious known do's, right? So we have known do's and don'ts, and then we're going to have some not so commonly known things that you might not know yet. So layers. Layers is a gimme. Everybody knows layers. Sometimes some of us forget layers when we're inside all the time and we're still freezing to death. I'm so cold, I don't want to turn the heat up, but what am I going to do? So I had forgotten temporarily that I needed layers. So as you can see, I have a layer. I have another layer. I also have what I call a half layer, which is a sports bra. And we're actually already up over freezing this morning. We were below freezing this morning, but I think we're already up at freezing or above. When it was 16.5 degrees, there were 3 layers, y'all. There were 3. There was like a tank top and then the long sleeve shirt and then the sweatshirt. So we all know layers really helps. Cover your head. I'm not a hat person. When I was a kid, my mother could not keep a hat on me to save her life. In fact, my mittens were on a string. I don't know if anybody else had those. If you did, drop a comment, raise your hand. My mittens were on a string because I would lose everything, but she could not keep a hat on my head. I have hats. I have beanies. One's reflective. I have beanies because if it's that cold, I will in fact put a hat on my head. I wear them gradually more and more, sometimes when I don't feel like messing with my hair and it's a hot mess. But we all know this. We know that layers, and we know that covering your head can be responsible for a good chunk of your body's heat loss. We know that keeping your core warm is hugely important, because if your core is warm, it's easier to warm up the rest of your extremities. A lot of people tend to focus on hands and feet first, but what you really need to focus on in order is core, head, and then hands and feet. But these are things that most of us know, and if you didn't, you're welcome. Because those of us that have always been down south may not know all these tricks. Like I said, I was born down south. I grew up north, and I've been back down here for a very long time. We won't talk about how long. Very long. Since 1990, I've been back down in Florida. But people that grew up in the south don't necessarily know all these tricks. So keep the core warm. And also, your layers don't have to be thermal. Thermal is really great if you have it. Thermal's changed a lot over the years. Thermal is not always, it can be hard to find, especially in the south. It can be hard to find your traditional long underwear. Layers work. It doesn't matter whether they're thermal or not, because the key with the layers is trapping body heat under the layer, between the layers. So, fleece line things. My boutique has fleece line leggings. I was picking on my daughter the other day because she was like, I found fleece line sweatpants at Dick's on sale. And I was like, the whole point of sweatpants is fleece. It just cracked me up. And it's probably because in this modern day, we have joggers that don't have any fleece to them. We call them joggers instead of sweats, but you get the idea. So you don't have to have thermal layers, but layers are super important. And sometimes it really just doesn't matter what the layer is. And in fact, for those of us that live in the South and live or run or whatever and live in sweat wicking layers, sweat wicking is not always the ideal thing to have. You want less breathable fabric. A lot of times when you're layering up, you want the sweat wicking on your feet. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so again, back to known do's and don'ts. Heaters, ovens, space heaters. Most of us know the rules here on how to keep warm and how to do it safely. Heaters, space heaters are great. I can remember as a kid being so cold when I woke up in the morning in my flannel nightgown, because we had, yes, flannel nightgown. I said flannel nightgown. It was a cute little girl's flannel nightgown. We had 2 wood stoves, but they would obviously die down overnight. It wasn't a forced heat wood heating system, or forced air wood heating system. In any case, I would wake up. It would be super cold in the morning. I had to be super quiet so I didn't wake anybody else up, because I was the early bird. And so I would sit in between the space heater and the dryer and lean up against the back of I guess it was maybe the washer. And I would pull my nightgown down over my knees, and I would literally be like this far away from the space heater. Probably not safe. And since there was a fair amount of polyester in my nightgown, I can remember having these weird little holes that felt like melted plastic on the inside of my nightgown, and never knowing what it was until I got older and saw what melted plastic looked like. And I was like, oh, it was literally melting my nightgowns. I don't know how I didn't catch on fire, because I was literally usually less than a foot away from the space heater in the mornings, just sitting there soaking up heat. And everybody wonders why I take these hot showers. In any case, so we all know the rules. Be careful with space heaters. Don't plug, if you're using heating elements of any kinds, electric things, like heating pads, electric blankets, Space heaters. I have a space heater here in my office. It looks like a little fireplace. It was given to us for free. Those don't get plugged into extension cords. That's really important. They need to be plugged directly into the outlet. They can be very dangerous. We also need to watch with things like blankets and heating pads that we don't accidentally yank the plug partway out of the wall, because that can cause an arc, and that's a whole new problem. So heaters, ovens, space heaters. We know a lot of people use the oven to heat the house. When do we do it? After we've been running the oven. Instead of keeping it closed while it cools back down, we just crack it open a little bit, helps warm up the kitchen. I can remember growing up, my stepdad would light the gas oven and open it up a little bit. That's not always a very recommended thing, because there's a lot of problems that can come along with that. So we're not really supposed to use ovens for heat per se, but if you're a baker, if you're a chef, it's your time to shine when it's cold. Do all the baking, do all the cooking, and that will help heat up the kitchen as well as the whole house. So we all know these rules. Heating pads can burn you. I had to switch to heating pads with automatic timers or automatic shutoffs a few years ago, because a couple of loved ones got burned falling asleep on heating pads. So we still have to be safe even with things we're using for electric heat. And I saw some cool, or gas heat or whatever the case may be. If the power's out, we do have a gas fireplace, a propane fireplace. But I've seen people in the neighborhood sitting in the garage with a fireplace going. The front door of the garage is open, but they're still inside, and that's still iffy. So, like I said, we all know these basic do's and don'ts. Let the sunshine in. Close off unoccupied rooms. Reverse your ceiling fans, which I didn't actually learn till about 10 years ago, that if you reverse your ceiling fan to clockwise, it pushes air down, which you need in the wintertime because heat rises. So reverse your ceiling fans to clockwise, plug drafts, blah, blah, blah. We all know somebody, and if you don't know somebody, then you can say you know somebody now. Back when I lived with my ex-husband in a old trailer with a concrete addition, it would get so old because it had those old mobile home windows that were really super thin. And we were laughing because he had like you might be a redneck if calendar back then. And we had literally just put plastic up over all the windows on the mobile home side, which made a huge difference. And then that you might be a redneck if, the first cold front of the season has you putting up plastic over your windows. And we were just dying laughing because it was so funny, but y'all, it works. I can remember we had these big plate glass windows in the house when I was growing up. And when it started to get colder, we got that first freeze, my stepfather would put plastic over those big plexiglass windows. And that's where I got the idea from. And we put plastic up because it was so stinking cold and drafty in that mobile home side, or maybe it was the addition side. I don't remember. In any case, we put the plastic up and it made such a huge difference. So it works. Regardless of whatever stigma, redneck stigma, eyebrows raised, whatever you might get. If you've got drafty windows and you can't afford to get them fixed, put some plastic up over them. In the wintertime, it works. But these are all known do's and don'ts. So what's new here? What have I got new for you? Move. Well, we knew that already, right? But don't sweat. We knew the first part. We know moving keeps us warmer. But when we start sweating, that sweat is our body's cooling process. And that's a process we don't want our body to start when we are cold or working outside or whatever. So the recommendation is to move for 30 seconds, not for 30 minutes, and do different. And that I didn't know. I knew movement was important. And I know that if I do start sweating, if we're still very cold, then it's time to change clothes, grab a shower, whatever. But very specifically, when I was looking all of this up for new unusual tips, what I found was move, but don't sweat. Because again, sweating not only starts to cool your body's cooling process, but I'll tell you a little something else in a minute that will apply to the sweat too. All right, layers of blankets versus one. We all tend to grab the biggest blanket, the thickest blanket we can find. We have this really nice handmade blanket. We have actually 3 really nice handmade blankets, but one is like twice as thick as the other ones. So I tend to grab that. You know what I mean? Or grab one of the hand knit blankets to put over me when I'm sitting on the couch if we're watching TV or whatever. But layers of blankets work the same way as layers of clothes. So instead of grabbing one blanket, you don't need the thickest blanket in the house. You might just need a couple of thin blankets that you can layer over each other. Why? Because for the same reason as we layer our clothes, heat gets trapped in between. Good morning, Miss Dawn. Lights. Research shows, so now we're back to the therapy light I talked about. Because we're not talking about lights today, but instead we're talking about easy ways to warm yourself up. Lights, research shows that people perceive they are warmer when lights are brighter. So especially if it's gloomy and gray outside, which a lot of my people up north, they're experiencing a lot of gloomy and gray right now for many, many days in a row. Turning on lights, even if they're the LED lights, can make you perceive a brighter room, makes you feel warmer, makes you perceive that you are warmer. And perception is half the battle, y'all. It really, really is. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. So, you know, again, back to if you're using light therapy, you know, for your seasonal affective disorder, that light may make you perceive that you're a little warmer too. All right, damp socks. We're going to talk about this. This is a thing, y'all. This is something I read about probably 5 or 6 years ago. And I totally didn't believe it. I was like, that's not right. That can't be true. Like serious, you know, first line of defense skeptic going on here. Didn't believe it. Somebody was like, if you're cold for no reason or you're cold and you can't shake it, check your socks to see if they're damp. What? No way. I'm like, I live in Florida. I'm at work. I'm wearing socks and I'm wearing a pair of dress boots. There's no way my socks are damp. Guess what? I found myself one day in the office getting cold and wanting to go turn up the heat. I mean, it was normal Florida cold outside, like maybe in the 50s, not, you know what I mean? So I took my boots off and I checked my socks, and I'll be darned if my socks weren't damp. So I continued to test this theory 2 or 3 times because it was that time of year when I was wearing socks anyway. And my socks do sweat a little bit. A lot of people's do. And what I found was that every time that I started to get cold where I just didn't feel like I could warm up, or I felt like I needed to turn up the heat or drink something warm or whatever, I checked my socks and my socks were damp. And I just said that in a comment to a friend's post the other day, and she's like, what? I don't think that's the problem. Here's the truth. Most of us have sweaty feet. Most of us have them. Some are worse than others. Mine tend to be a little worse than others. And when our socks get damp, y'all, moisture conducts heat away from the body 25 times faster than when you're dry. So remember we just talked about moving but not sweating? If you're moving to the point of sweating but you can't change your clothes, you now have damp clothes, damp sports bras, damp shirts, whatever, that help to conduct heat away from you because they're moist. Same idea with the socks. When the socks are damp, they're sucking the heat out of you. It's basically what it boils down to. It's a thing, y'all. It is a thing. To the point where I even have 2 pairs of slippers, because if I'm running around in my slippers with no socks on, it's even worse, and I have to rotate the slippers. Same reason. They get damp. They're not keeping me warm anymore. Most of the time I've learned that I'm just better off in my slippers if I have socks on, but those socks have to be changed. At least, you know, if I'm home all day and I'm up from 5 o'clock, I've got socks on from 5:30 in the morning until 8 o'clock at night. Guess what? Those socks are getting changed 2 or 3 different times because I know when they're damp, because I start getting cold and I can't figure out why. Okay. All right. I'm going to start wrapping this up here. Hot hands and battery operated warmers, y'all. This is not, I'm going to toss out a lot of brand names here today. I already have, you know, I've talked about my online boutique. I've talked about base layers. I didn't mention that some of my base layers are still Under Armour because they're infrared and they're designed, you know, even though my boutique has some amazing stuff, fleece line leggings, the whole 9 yards. I have not found where we've come out with anything yet that quite goes up against the Under Armour infrared that is rated for like below 20-degree temperatures. It's okay, Victoria. I'm running long and you can always go back to the beginning. Dawn, yes, if you're worried about your socks being damp, that's probably why you don't like to wear them. Because they have to be changed often, early and often. So anyway, so yes, I'm tossing out brand names. Don't think anything of it. I'm just telling you all the things that I like. I do still own some Under Armour base layers. I hold on to them religiously as if they were long underwear because that's essentially what they're for. Even though, you know, good morning, Miss Kayla. Y'all, right here. This is where it's at. My daughter didn't believe me. They had a flag football game this weekend. It was going to be super cold. I gave her some of these because I was worried about them expiring because they do. If you're familiar with Hot Hands, those are those great little disposable handheld things that you can stick in your pockets or in your gloves. They work great. I've been using them for years. They're fabulous. Most people don't know these exist. These are Hot Hands foot warmer insoles. These are not the little ones that just go under your toes and the ball of your feet. This is the whole stinking insole, y'all. And I forgot how good these were until I tested the ones I had in the closet to make sure they were okay for my daughter to take, to make sure they would work so that she didn't have to buy any. And y'all, these are fantastic. So inside the house, okay, they were super warm the first couple hours. And now, mind you, these expired. These have an expiration date of 2023. So according to the package, these expired almost 3 years ago. Yeah, 10/2023. So almost 3 years ago. So about 2.5. They're supposed to provide up to 9 hours of heat. Yes, exactly, Kayla. That's exactly when we started discovering that those little Hot Hands actually go really well in your gloves is when we were out refereeing in the sleet about 16 years ago. But these babies right here, I'll tell you what, the second best thing to having your core warm is having your feet warm. They stick to the bottom of your shoe. I would say, I don't remember what I told my daughter. I'd have to look back at our text, but at 2 hours, they were still very warm. As the day went on, I stopped feeling them as much, probably because my socks were damp. But I had my tennis shoes on. And they were still, like, when I took my shoes off at, like, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I started this at, like, I don't know, 8:30, maybe not quite 8, they were still warm to the touch of my hand. I couldn't feel them in my shoes anymore, probably because my feet were desensitized, but they were still warm to my hand when I pulled them out of the shoe. So these things are amazing. They come in all different shapes and sizes. But you don't want the toe warmers. You want the whole foot insoles if you can get them. Amazon, that's all I've got to say. I found these battery-operated hand warmers over Christmas, and they work. I haven't tested them to see how long they work because we were low on batteries at the time. But if you don't like the idea of disposal, they're not going to fit in your shoe. I'm just saying. They're not that flat. But if you like the idea, if you don't like the idea of the disposable hand warmers, these run on batteries. Batteries are disposable too, y'all. Pick the lesser of the two evils. They did warm up really fast and they got very warm. What I haven't tested yet is how long they last. So, Hot Hands, battery operated warmers, you know, all the things. You guys know I love my props. There's lots of options out there that are kind of newer technology, but the old school stuff still works. Hot water bottle, microwave a hot compress, layers, you know, the standard stuff, hydration, hot beverages help. I am a direct reflection of whatever, my body temperature is a direct reflection of what I'm consuming. If it's hot outside and I'm consuming cold water, I'm good. If it's cold outside and I'm consuming cold water, guess who's not getting their water today? So hydration is really important. A lot of people don't know this, but hydration is just as important in the wintertime when you're cold as it is in the summer. However, it is harder for most of us to stay hydrated for the same reason that I just said, is that our bodies are a direct reflection, a direct mirror of whatever we're consuming temperature-wise. So what ends up happening is we're trying to drink our water. I'm usually grabbing the room temperature bottled water instead of my filtered water in the fridge because it's warmer. Humidity, hydration, hot beverages. We tend to gravitate towards the hot beverages, not just because they warm us from the inside, but because feeling them, putting our hands around the cup, whatever, gives us the perception of warmth. So there's that perception thing again. But here's the deal. If you're struggling to get your hydration when it's cold, like I do, drink herbal teas that are caffeine free. Herbal teas that are caffeine free are going to get you that warmth that you love. They're also going to count pretty much as water because they don't have caffeine in them to act as a diuretic to leach out the water you're trying to get into your body. Okay, so and then the last thing, humidity makes the room feel warmer. Again, for those of us that grew up north, you probably know this somewhere in the back of your head. I knew it somewhere in the back of my head because down here in Florida, I am cold until the humidity starts to tick up outside. Once we get over 70 degrees and the humidity starts to really ramp up outside, I get warmer inside. It is the weirdest thing. It's like I can feel the humidity from inside. Even though we have a dehumidifier in our AC, as soon as that humidity starts to really ramp up outside, I feel it inside. That means also in the winter, humidity makes the room feel warmer. Duh. I feel like that should have been a gimme when I read it. I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Because that humidity helps to keep a little bit warmer in the air. That's directly from Good Housekeeping. So those are some new things that are not as common, newer things that are not as commonly known that you can check out, that you can think about, you can kind of incorporate in. And my challenge to you is remember this, and I think it's not wrong. You guys know we end up talking about mindset and perception a lot on Wellness Wednesday. Perception is half the battle. It really is. The more we complain about or focus on the cold or focus on cold as the enemy, and this is from a CNN Health article that I found, the more we are likely to give into it, the more it is likely to affect us. So rather than look at the cold as something to dread or something to control, we need to perceive it as an objective, acceptable sensation, and we can control how we respond to it. I just talked about that a little bit last week. And some of the best ways it says to adapt to cold is to wear clothing in layers, and then removing it gradually as you lower the or lowering the thermostat and putting on more layers to get your body to adapt. But I thought that was interesting. The perception is half the battle thing. So I challenge you to look at the cold not as the enemy, but as something, even if it's not something you want to embrace, maybe something to just get through better. And it may actually change how it impacts you. And remember some of these tips, the ones we already knew and the ones we didn't know. And, you know, most people already know the ones that I listed off that were the known do's and don'ts. But let's face it, if you're like me, I'm 52. I've been out of Michigan for a long time. Some of it I just forgot because, you know, use it or lose it. And then when I put on my first layer under a sweatshirt one day and I was so much warmer, I'm like, oh, why didn't I think of this before? You know, it wasn't new information. It was just buried a little bit. It was buried in the snowbank. All right, so remember these things and I'm going to let you go. Safety first, always. Whenever you're using candles, open flame items, which includes candles, anything with electric, gas, anything like that inside the house, please, please, please remember safety first. Don't use generators inside. Don't use open flame stuff inside unless it's like a controlled fireplace. Just remember that. Gas ovens, whatever, all those things we talked about. Safety first, always. And sometimes we'll even forget safety if we're just focused on getting warmer. And remember the fuel is fire. Food, hot beverages, not just hot beverages, but food. A lot of times I find myself getting cold if I've skipped lunch. And then by mid-afternoon, I'm like freezing. And it's because I haven't given my body any fuel. So fuel is important. Think soups, think hot things. Again, you're often a direct reflection of whatever you're consuming at the time. Again, if you're a cook or a baker, it's your time to shine. Fire up that kitchen, get going. You're right there. You're keeping an eye on it. It's safe and it's warming everything up. And then when you turn your oven off and it's cooling down, crack that baby open for a little extra heat. And of course, you guys, the whole reason I did this is I know we're at the tail end of our current cold snap, but we're not done yet. It's only February. I am 100% confident that we are not done yet. I have seen cold snaps in Florida as late as May. And so I encourage you to stay warm, employ some of these tips. I hope you enjoyed this one a little bit lighter today. And until next Wednesday, I will see you soon and be well. Bye.